everybody, welcome back to another lesson here in the Build Your Own BPOS course. Now I would say that this is one of the last lessons that we're going to have in this course because it is one of the last that are currently planned, but you never know, there could be another 20 or 30 so, or maybe a more advanced course to come later. That remains to be determined, but either way, whether this is the final session in the course or not, believe me when I say that we've only just scratched the surface of BPOS features and functionality throughout this course. Personally, I've been working with BPOS for going on 6 years and still learning new things all the time. And of course, as the software is updated and improved upon, there are always new features around the corner, so just stay tuned. But anyhow, let's focus on this session. We are going to be looking at scheduled jobs and our weekly schedule, not to be confused with one another, which is partly why we're looking at them together. So both of these components at large can be used to schedule and automate things within the system, but each do have unique use cases and features. There isn't really much of an agenda per se, aside from the timestamps that I will have put up on the screen here. So we'll just start with scheduled jobs. There's a lot more to cover with them, or at least there can be, depending on the specific job type and job class, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. Then after we go through all the particulars of scheduled jobs and we look at a couple of them, a couple specific jobs and one in particular that is very much related to the weekly schedule, we will get into the weekly schedule and we'll run through the particulars of that. Alright, so let's get into it with scheduled jobs first then. Just a few points on them before we jump into back office, because you might be wondering what these even are. It's probably best to explain before we start going through all the configurations and options in back office. Now there's really a wide range of uses for scheduled jobs, as we'll see later, but at their core, it's kind of in the name, they're used to automate and schedule some tasks and system functions. So we create them from a list of preset options. Each different scheduled job has been designed to complete its own unique task or function. Most of them have some settings that we'll need to configure. We then set a schedule that determines when the task or process or function will be completed, and that's it. It is a set it and forget it component of back office that increases efficiency, makes a lot of system admin tasks even easier than they already are. There's also certain things like some integrations and interfaces that would not even be possible without the use of a scheduled job. So as you'll come to see, we have dozens of varying scheduled jobs that we can use for automating all sorts of different processes and procedures, some of which can take the place of someone needing to complete that process or procedure or task manually. But it is important to note that while scheduled jobs can of course be scheduled to run at predetermined times, we can also run scheduled jobs manually if we'd like to. And many times that will still be more efficient than completing the same task completely manually by first setting up the scheduled job with all the configuration options that we have available. The job options, you'll see what those are in a couple minutes. And then just using, we have a run now option within the job itself that you'll see in a few minutes that we can use to manually run a job rather than have it run on a schedule. Cool, but that's probably enough of an explanation for now. Let's hop into back office and we'll take a closer look at these. And before we even get into the scheduled jobs component itself, you could probably guess that we have an operator privilege that's related to this and controls access for an operator to be able to maintain scheduled jobs. And that is going to be here on the General tab. And it is in, if I can find it again, in the system setup section here, maintain scheduled jobs. So that just needs to be on for yourself or whoever within your organization will need to access and maintain scheduled jobs. And then we will be able to access scheduled jobs from, you guessed it, the system setup menu. And here about halfway down, scheduled jobs. Now, as we've come to expect with most things in back office, this list will be empty for new databases. Not a single scheduled job is created by default, so it leaves them entirely customizable to what is required in your database for your organization. So what we'll do then is go ahead and add a new one and start going through these settings here. Honestly, the best place to start is just going to be at the top, albeit some of these are going to be a bit self-explanatory. The job name, for example, probably doesn't need much of an introduction. This is simply going to set the name for the job. Why that's important is that it will appear in back office and in Smart Controller. And for Smart Controller, it will show when the job is running, has run, or has failed, or when it's been completed. So it's particularly important if there are going to be multiple similar jobs created in the same database, that they each have unique names in order to tell them apart when they're running, and we can see them running in Smart Controller. Then we have another self-explanatory one, inactive. So we've seen inactive flags throughout and other places in back office. We would want to make a scheduled job inactive if we want to just temporarily deactivate it rather than delete it altogether or alter its schedule. So a use case for doing so would be if, let's say, a job that's run for part of the year once daily, but the rest of the year it's not needed. But we don't want to delete it because we know that we're going to need it again in a few months' time, 6 months' time maybe. So yeah, sure, we could delete the schedule for it, and we could save it without a schedule and then add a schedule back to it when we need to. Or we could just leave that alone. We could make it inactive until we need it again and just leave the schedule as is. Cool, then moving down to these 3 drop downs here, these are where things do start to get a bit interesting. So these actually work in succession. So how these other ones are now with the DLL name and the class name only pertains to if the job type is set to external DLL. Like it is now, it will be by default when we are creating a new job, when we first add a new job. So we won't get into detail with these other job types today, but what they are essentially are broader categories of jobs. Now, more often than not, we will want to start with external DLL and then go from there, although others can be used as needed. If I tab down through these, notice that each one has a little description that will show a little bit more information and how they can be used. You will also notice that the job options section at the bottom changes dynamically depending on the selection up here. We'll get to the job options in a minute, but yes, the job options settings are going to be unique to each, and as we move on, you'll see that is the case for individual class names when we are using the external DLL too. Before we get to the class name though, if we stick with our external DLL here, we will then have the DLL name, which needs to be set, and that further categorizes jobs into the DLL where they sit. So you can see there's about a dozen or so here, but the most common are probably going to be the job standard, job export, and job scan data. We have a few others that are common as well. But yeah, those are going to house many jobs that are used for integrations and interfaces and a lot of BPOS core processes and procedures as well. Now, once we have a DLL selected, so if I just go with, I'll just go with job standard here. Once we have that selected, the list of available class names which actually define the individual jobs, this will change. So right now with this set to job standard, we can see the variety of jobs that are within that DLL. And if I change, let's say I change that to job export, you can see that we have a different list of class names, a different list of jobs that are available now. So each class name being a separate job, each with its own unique purpose, will have a short description here explaining a bit more about what it's used for. And as I tab through these, notice that each one does indeed have some varying job options. So that job options section will change depending on the class name, depending on the individual job. Now, some of the job options settings will be the same or very similar from one job to the next. So in that regard, as you gain experience with setting up scheduled jobs, they will not be entirely new each time per se. However, there are some, particularly those that are used for integrations and interfaces, that will have some unique options. Some will even have additional little pop-out windows. For example, if we go back to the job standard DLL, and if I try to remember a class name that has an example of what I want to show you, I think Linkly Pay at Table would be one. Yep. So we've got a little button at the bottom here for some advanced settings, and that is going to open up a new small little window here for some advanced settings that need to be set for this particular scheduled job to run with only a few options actually in this job options section. So there will be some scheduled jobs that will have things like that, either in addition or to substitute anything in the job options section. But the bottom line is, when we are getting started with creating a new scheduled job, where we should be starting with is setting the job type, and then if we are going with external DLL, to set the DLL name and then the class name, and then to move on from there. But those should be done before just about anything else. Maybe the job name could be entered first, but regardless, before moving on, those should be set, and we should make sure we've got the correct job selected. So then moving on after that, we can select a venue or venues where the job will run. So really only applicable for multi-venue organizations. Obviously in ours we just have the one, but in multi-venues we can choose for a job to run at all venues or only at a specific venue. Then we have a setting for what to do when a scheduled job doesn't run as expected, so our run missed jobs option here. A bit of background for this, which will become clear as we get further into this lesson, but a Smart Controller must be running for a scheduled job to run. Now, if Smart Controller is not running when a scheduled job is scheduled to run, the job is considered to have been missed. So what this setting does is it allows for attempting to rerun any missed jobs once Smart Controller is running again. Well, actually the first option, which is going to be set by default, is never, which means that missed jobs, or for this particular scheduled job, any missed jobs will not be rerun. So we might want to have that set for jobs that typically only run at startup anyway. But if we do want to rerun for any that might be set to a specific time or day that have been missed, we can opt to either run once only, meaning that let's say the job was scheduled to run once an hour and Smart Controller was off for 6 hours, so we've missed 6 instances of the job running. Rather than run the job 6 times, it will only be ran once. However, if we do want the job run for all instances that it was missed, we would go with run all missed. Select that option there, and then each individual instance of the job running that was missed would be rerun, and there are instances out there where we would need to have that happen. Cool. Then next down we have our run as option, which is used to select the operator that the job will be run as. So a bit of background for this: some jobs require that certain operator privileges need to be set for the job to be able to run. Therefore, an operator who does have those privileges enabled will need to be set here so that the job will run as expected. Important to note is that any audit log entries that are created from the job being run will be linked to the operator that's set here. By default, whichever operator is logged into back office and creates a new job is going to be selected, but we can change that if we'd like to and just select an individual operator from the list there. Up to you, of course, but depending on the job, you may wish to create a proxy operator in the database, set the operator privileges as needed, or you could use an operator record for a manager or a system admin. But yeah, up to you how you'd like to handle that. All right, next column over, starting not with a setting, but merely some information here. Our created is going to show the date and exact time that the job was created. Below that though is our logging mode setting, which is going to determine when any audit log entry is captured regarding this job. So we can choose to create an audit log entry only when the job is started, when it both starts and finishes, or not at all. Will of course be up to your organization, and this may change from job to job, but we have the option to select that there. Of course, don't forget that we can link an audit event to an alert as well. If maybe a system admin or someone wants to get a message sent to them whenever a certain job is run, we could have that happen. Then we have this overrides job setting here. What this lets us do is choose another scheduled job from the system to override with this one, if they are both scheduled to run at the same time, only if the start time is exactly the same. A use case for this would be, let's say a job is set to run every day at startup, but a different job, this one, also runs at startup, but let's say only on Mondays. They could be different iterations of the same job, but maybe they're configured differently, or they could be completely different jobs altogether. But on Mondays, when they're both scheduled to run at startup, we'll say, we only want or need one of them to run. So using this, we would set whichever job we do want to run to override the other one, and then only this one would run. Of course, we don't have any in this list at the moment, since we don't have any other jobs that have been created and saved yet in this database. But if there were other jobs in the database, they'd all be listed here, and we could select which one this job would override. And same goes for this chained job drop down here. It will be empty for now for us, but once we've got other jobs created and saved, we would be able to select one. So what this is used for is to select another job from the system to run automatically immediately after this job runs. There's many use cases for this, where we'd only want a job to run after another job has run first. So the second job would not need to have a schedule set for it. We could just schedule this job and then set the second job here as the chained job, and it will run automatically right after this one does. Not only that, but multiple jobs can be chained one after another, meaning that we can cater for a high degree of automation using scheduled jobs and this chained job dropdown. So we could have a job that's chained to this. Whichever job is chained to this could have a job chained to that. Whichever job is chained to that could have another job chained to that, so on and so forth. And I'll just reiterate here that this is the job that will run first. The job that we're setting up here is the job that would run first, and whichever job is selected will be the chained job to run next. Cool, well that covers us for this top portion of all these sort of universal general settings for scheduled jobs. And then next down we have the actual scheduling component. So if we go to add a new schedule here, this has mostly the same configuration options that we've seen elsewhere for setting schedules in back office. So we can opt to choose some overall start and end dates, then either have it run every day or only certain days of the week, or whichever day of each X number of months we can opt for there, or just once a year. The only thing that's different compared to the other scheduling components in back office is that for the time option down here, we are not setting a range like we usually do, say for a promotion. We are just setting the exact time that the job will run. And as you can see, we do have an option to run it at startup, so whenever Smart Controller starts. But if we do not want that to happen, we can set it for a specific time if we would like to. And of course, if we needed to, we can have multiple scheduled entries for the same job. So maybe we need one to run on the first of every month at startup, and also every Monday at midnight, for example, or something like that. We could certainly do that. And I should also point out that beneath the schedule section here, we will be able to see the next time that the job is scheduled to run. So how I have this set here, just arbitrarily set something there for this to run at the midnight on the 1st of every January, so we could see the next run would indeed be the 1st of January 2023. Next to that, we can see how many times the job has currently been run, and we can see the last time that it was run. Of course, in this case, never. But if it had been run previously, the most recent time that the job was run would be shown there. And then lastly, we of course have the job options, which we saw earlier will change dynamically depending on the job type and the class name that's been selected. There's really no point in going over the job options for any specific scheduled job, although we will in a couple minutes go over one in particular. But where would we draw the line if we started going through these? We could be here for hours, days, weeks, even going through each individual scheduled job. And most of them are tied to some other back office component that we'd most likely need to reference as well. And in the case of the system components that we have not seen yet, as well as many integrations and interfaces that use scheduled jobs, we would need a bit of background for those to even make sense. So we would be here literally for days if we started to go through every possible job option that is out there. But yeah, some jobs will have many settings in the job options section, while others may only have one or two. And again, some may have some advanced settings, some pop-out windows and things like that. Now, once the job options are all completed, along with a schedule being set and everything else, we could save the job and we're good to go. It really is a set it and forget it thing. Of course, we can come back and edit them if we need to. Now, before we finish up with scheduled jobs though, I do just want to point out the run now option. I had mentioned this at the beginning. So what this is used for is to run the job manually, so off schedule. If I wanted to set up a job now, maybe I will set one up. So I'll go with a relatively, I think I've got an account scheduled job in mind that I can set up. So just 1 second, I will get one configured, and I'll pause the recording here, stop the recording here. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, so what I've set up here is a job called account settings, and we can see in the description here, this sets various fields for accounts and account groups. Now in the job options, we can have this to set by using an account profile. I don't have one set here. And then we can also set by using an account or an account group. So we can set it to a specific account or to an account group. I've got it set here for our tier 1A account group. And then we have a couple other options here to either turn the group settings flag on or off, and to be able to change the account price number. So how I have this set here is going for the account group called tier 1A and any accounts that are in it. It's going to turn the use group settings flag on. So I'm not going to run this right now. I'm just going to show you that the group settings flag for that account group and the accounts in it is currently off. Notice though that, so I deleted that schedule actually. So when I go to save this now, we're going to get a little prompt here letting us know that we have not set up a schedule and asking us, essentially saying the job will never run, at least unless we run it manually, which is the point of what I'm going to show. And do we want to save it anyway? So I'm going to select yes there. If we go ahead and look at our account list, this account group tier 1A currently has the use group settings flag off, as well as the accounts in it. So I'll turn that off and I'll go ahead and save that. Now, if we go back and run this scheduled job, I will also need, actually I'll show you this before, so I don't have Smart Controller running right now. If I go and head to run that, we're going to get that prompt again that there's no schedule set for it, and it's going to save the setting. Cool, request failed because Smart Controller is not running, so I'll go ahead and run Smart Controller. Okay, so I've got Smart Controller running now. If I go ahead and select run now, we'll get that prompt again. I'll click yes, and that is going to now send that message to Smart Controller. If we go ahead and look at that. Cool, so we can confirm here that that job was started, and we can see it, as I mentioned earlier, the job name is going to show here. So I've given this one a unique name here, tier 1A group settings on. We can see that that has started and it's finished okay. So now if we go ahead and look at that account group, we can confirm those group settings have been set, they've been turned on, and same for the accounts within that group. Now, what I've done here is I have also created a second iteration of that same job, and in this case, I've set the group settings flag to be turned off. So if I go ahead and run that now, cool, we can see just like that, that has been started and finished okay. We can see some other things in Smart Controller here that are not related to the scheduled job, but just because I've just started Smart Controller a couple minutes ago, and it has attempted to send a local database to some tills that are offline, those have failed. Cool, so if we go ahead and we refer back to our account list now that we've run that job to turn that flag off, they have indeed been turned off for those. Cool, so just a quick little example there of running a scheduled job, running that manually, and using that run now option. Now, of course, we could have had a schedule there and had those run automatically for us. Again, a set it and forget it type thing. We could have had, maybe there's a case where we need to have the use group settings flag turned on for weekends and turned off during the week or something like that, and we could schedule that if we'd like to. Okay, now as we transition to the other portion of this lesson, the weekly schedule, there is one scheduled job in particular that we should look at because while it does mimic some of the functionality of the weekly schedule, it does behave differently. It's important to note the difference. Cool, so I will go ahead and add another job here, and the DLL for this one is job standard, and it is called till current setup. If I go ahead and find that, there we go. Cool, now what this scheduled job is used for, we can gather from the job options here, but also from the description, is that it will change the till's current setup. So within the options, in the job options down here, we can select which till we'd like to apply the changes to, or we can select all tills or in a certain store or store group if we go ahead and select that, or we can just have it set to all stores and all tills, which is going to be how this is set by default, but if we'd like to narrow that down, we can do so. And then the settings that we can change are things like many of the till's defaults and other important settings. So we've got the override map that we can change. We can change the price number. Oh, I need to select one of those, or select no change. We can select a price number, so one of the price numbers that have been configured in the database. We've got both points profiles, so the redeem one is over here, and then this one over here that just says points profile is the earn profile. We can change the key map set, we could change the table map set, and then this one here, not a setting, but we can schedule a shift change to occur at the tills automatically if we would like to do that. So we could have that set to one of our shift changes there, or one of our shifts there. And then also not a setting, we can send a message to the tills. Now I won't actually configure this to do anything right now and save it or run it or anything like that. We've just seen that in action for a different scheduled job on how they can be run. But the main reason I wanted to show this first before we get to the weekly schedule is because you'll see when we get into that it has a lot of options that are similar to these. And obviously this being a scheduled job, we can schedule some changes. So maybe let's say change the price number or a key map, for example, and then could set up another iteration of this same job where we change those back or change them to something else altogether. And as you'll come to see in a minute, the weekly schedule can do something very similar, just laid out differently. The main difference being that for scheduled jobs to run, as I mentioned earlier, and as we saw when I tried to run that scheduled job without Smart Controller running, is that Smart Controller does need to be running for the job to be started and run successfully. Therefore, if Smart Controller is down or a till gets disconnected, any changes that are scheduled based on this scheduled job would not happen. However, for the weekly schedule, which we may as well cancel out of this and head there, and that is actually located in the operational setup menu, by the way, is going to be down towards the bottom, weekly schedule. But as I was saying, for the weekly schedule, unlike scheduled jobs, the events that we schedule here do not run from Smart Controller. What that means is that even if Smart Controller is off or a till goes offline, the scheduled events will still occur. Aside from that though, this is arguably also a more intuitive way to schedule changes for some tills and to then be able to see them all at a glance here too. So if I go ahead and add a new event, we can take a look. We can see that this little form looks, this form here looks quite similar to the pricing schedule that we saw in another lesson earlier in this course. But from this, we can choose the till or tills that we'd like to apply these changes to. Just note that we are only selecting an individual till or all tills. So unlike with the scheduled job where we can set for a store or a store group. So there are some differences. We'll see as we go through this, there are some pros and cons to both. Then just set the schedule starting with the day of the week and the time for these changes to go into effect. And then just set whatever we'd like to have change on that day and time. So this has options that are nearly identical to the scheduled job. We've got the price number, the key set, the points profile, although for this one it is just the earn profile. We don't have the redeem profile to set here. We've got the function map, the table map set, and we also have a shift change option here. All else equal, if there's one advantage that the scheduled job has, it would be that there's some limitations here with setting a schedule. So these can only be set on a recurring weekly basis. Actually, if I go ahead and I'll just add a couple things here and we'll just go ahead and click OK. So we can see that, yeah, there's going to be some limitations here. So we can only set this on a recurring weekly basis, not anything for like, the first of the month or the third Wednesday of every fourth month or anything like that. We also cannot set any overall start and end dates. So once these are set, they're set. We would need to come in manually and edit or delete a schedule for other cases where the scheduled job, for example, on the other hand, could be made inactive or have a schedule that might be more appropriate if we need to cater for some things like that. So overall, the scheduling component within the job does cater for more sort of obscure scheduling options beyond a simple 7-day schedule. As I said, pros and cons to each, of course, and maybe a recurring weekly schedule is going to be suitable for your venue. If it's not, then the scheduled job might be the better option. Just keep in mind the inherent limitation there that the scheduled job will only run if Smart Controller is running and the till is connected. Whereas again with these events will run even if Smart Controller is down or the till is offline. Since these scheduled events are stored locally on the till, they would still take place. Of course, provided that the event has been saved while the till was connected. But if that is the case, and the till goes offline or Smart Controller gets disconnected in some way, the event will still take place. So we can see here how this would look in this window, with a separate little window for each day of the week, having its own events listed out here. And we can also choose to filter that to specific event type if we'd like to do something like that. And we could also, if it is a multi-venue organization, we could filter it to a specific venue to just see the events in that venue also. But that is the gist of it, nothing overly complicated here. One thing I will just point out, obviously we can, if we want to edit this event, we could just double click to open that. We could highlight one of these instances and click edit. If we do go to delete an event, we are going to get a notification here that we have selected to delete a schedule that has multiple events connected to it, because when I added this event, there's these two distinct events within it. And do you wish to edit this schedule instead? So if I click yes, that's going to open that to edit, because we do have the two events within that larger event, if that makes sense. But if we do go ahead and go to delete that, and to this question, do you wish to edit the schedule instead? If I select no, that is just going to delete that altogether. And then if I did not delete that and we wanted to change those till settings back or change them to something else, we would just need to have another event created. So we could have one event that's set to maybe change these things at midnight on a Monday, and then have them change again at midnight on a Friday, or something like that. Or even if we need them to change again later in that same day, as long as we have a second event scheduled and saved, that will occur. Yeah, but that is the gist of it. Nothing too overly complicated here at all. And that will actually be it for this lesson. Thanks as always for joining me, and we'll see you next time.